has a way of pressurizing us. Stuff enough good content in it so that when pressure comes, what they ooze out is a sweet smelling flavor. Your children should be stuffed with the right things. It wouldn't make sense because life will press them. It's not an option. It's not about if, it's when. So how your child smells out there depends on how much. That's why at the time we had a free fall from the plane, close to a minute, our mask fell out. We're hearing Oluwa, we're hearing Mommy, we're hearing Jesus. We had different versions because there was pressure. So those people were saying Baba, 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 it was what they knew. So the person beside me was wearing, looking like an hijab, but it was Jesus that came out of her mouth. So probably that's what she thought would save at that time. I've seen where a child hits the leg, the mother is not around, but the first thing he calls out for is mommy. That's exactly. So the response we have, or the response, I'll talk about the culture now. That's why they said naturally, there's a saying that says that culture eats strategy for breakfast. No matter your strategies, no matter what the things you surround yourself with, the content inside, the culture you have is what will come out when there's pressure. So as an organization, for instance, as a church, no matter the strategies, if the people implementing don't have the right culture, it will fail. The same thing with any nation or any life. So I think basically that's the way I think.
Thank you so much, Nsikan. Ogo.
So it's also important to start early to set boundaries for your children. So we know, especially with media, there are certain controls we can put in place to guard what they access. Okay, my time was old, but growing up, I don't think I ever heard secular music in my house. I heard it in parties, and there was this thing of you don't dance to a secular music. It's not even possible. Like we go to party and what they tell us is, or what we do is maybe to pray. We won't dance. They know we will not dance. So it's all those kind of things we need to start putting in place so the children know that there's only for so long that you can do that. So that's why I said you start early, put the boundaries in place, and keep teaching, keep reinforcing those values that you believe as a family, and keep showing it, because children learn more from what they see than from what you say. So that's what I would say to safeguard the children.
Thank you, Ogo Buki.
Okay. I'll just piggyback off what she said. We have to be intentional about teaching children. And I'll give an example of myself. I grew up, I'm the last child. My immediate older sibling is 6 years older than me. So I grew up in a household where I can't talk back. I cannot abuse somebody. It's just, it's just not, I just wasn't raised that way. And it had both positive and negative influence. Negative in the sense that I was bullied a lot when I went to boarding school, and I didn't know how to fight back. But positive in the sense that now that I'm grown, even it's a natural response. I just don't know how to, Buhari is a bad boy. How can you say that? I just don't know how to say certain things because, so like you said, put the right things in place, keep those conversations going, and when those pressures come, the right thing will come out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Buki. Okay, Ogo, this is for you. We read about the Rechabites in Jeremiah 35 and their devotion to the non-alcoholic traditions of their fathers. In your opinion, we'll start with you, Ogo. What two values or traditions will you be passing down to the next generation in your family? So we're hoping that each of you are going to give us two values that you will be passing down to the next generation. Thank you.
I'm taking it for granted that my next generation are Christians. So it's given but for my family, I think the first would be love for God. It's important. For me, it has shaped all of who I am, even because I was introduced to God very early, not just as a concept or as a big man up there, but as someone I could have a personal relationship with. So that is the first thing. And the second would be love for others. There is no discrimination. There is no, despite the differences, you must love people. So those are the two things for me.
Thank you, Ogo. So Ogo has wrapped up the Bible essentially. Buki, please.
Okay, I won't. That's a given. but I'll continue from there. There's something my mother used to say when we were growing up. She would say, "Èèyàn méjì ò kí ń gbẹ́kẹ̀lé nǹkan." Two people do not rely on the same thing, which essentially means respect other people around you. Don't take what does not belong to you. Be content, is what that means. So that's definitely something I want to pass down to my children and other young people around me. And the second thing is openness. I don't know. I have a close relationship with my siblings today because we're not raised to be competitive. We're raised to value what each person brought to the family. So I want a family where you just nurture that love and, so that your children and everybody is open, they communicate openly. And so I think those are two important things for me.
Thank you, Buki. Nsika.
Okay. Well, as a person, I believe in content. And my culture, there's my language zone, Owo, Edi, Iene, you're as wealthy as the people you have around you. So my dad always told me, if all you have is money, you're poor. So relationship is a currency. So one of the things that I want us to value or hand down is we tend to be so much online that we forget the conversations in-house around us. So we find our younger people struggle to even have a decent conversation, something that we wouldn't. So I would like to hand that down easily. Then secondly, we talked about eroding the culture of respect. It's visible, you can see it everywhere online. So those days, if you saw an elderly woman carry something, it does something to your heart. You want to help, even if you can't, somehow. But you would feel as though we should give respect. Somehow, I feel that part, because I've been in so many areas where I've seen young people abuse and insult way older men, and I feel like beating them, but I can't. Okay, so I think that's part of what I think somehow we should revive in the ears of our younger generation.
Thank you, Nsikan. So Nsikan's point has taken us right into the next question. So I'm going to read a couple of verses from the Bible, and then I will bring forward the question. So this is for you, Buki. You'll be starting off on this one. So Leviticus 19:32 says, "You shall stand up before the gray head and honor the face of an old man, and you shall fear your God. I am the Lord." Ephesians 6:1-4. "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Okay, so we have that situated, right? Now, the question is, in a society big on respect, such as ours, is the emphasis on respect stifling innovation and creativity? Is the emphasis on respect repressive to young ones? The reason why we're asking this question is, in some cultures in Nigeria, as a young person, you can never be right. Even if you're wronged, you're the one that's going to apologize. You're the one that's going to take the blame. You have organizations whereby younger people cannot bring opinions to the table. You have to, if you join, say, a bank, for instance, they want you to earn your stripes. So maybe it took a director, when he was coming up, it took him maybe 20 years before he got a laptop. And now, rather than assign you a laptop, they say, no, you must start where we started from. So we have these funny things going on in our culture. You also have let me just let you guys take it from there.
You're doing so well. You might as well just keep going. So for me, I think it's a yes and no, in the sense that, yes, because our culture forces us to respect elderly people, for instance, most of our cultures around Nigeria. But we understand respect to be something that is earned, not something that is demanded, right? So in that sense, sometimes I wonder, I think that it can be repressive. I think that when you force, I'll keep saying this, like I said, I'm the last born. So when you shame me, or sometimes even beat me because I'm not calling an older sister something, it hurts me. Why? Why should I call her sister something? Has she earned it? Like, Do I think she deserves to be called that? Did she bring it from heaven? And those were my responses when I was a child, right? And I got punished a lot for that. So for me, I think the important thing has always been that parents need to know your child. Have conversation. I'm the kind of child that if you talk to me, it sticks. If you beat me, you've not communicated. So you have to know the different children that you're raising or the different people that you're deliberately bringing up. But also know in the sense that, when they train you, or when parents train you and give you values, you have to also train yourself. Yorubas will say, "Watunra ebi." You will get exposed to certain things, and then you start to think. And one of those things is get exposed to the Bible, to God. There are certain things that even if your parents don't teach you, the Bible teaches you, so you're forced to do it. So in that sense, I would say maybe not, right? Because the Bible has a standard. You've raised some scriptures. Honor your father and your mother. It doesn't matter if they seemingly deserve it or not. I've seen situations where there are some irresponsible parents, unfortunately, right? And naturally, the natural instinct is not to respect them. But what has God asked you to do, right? You don't have to have anything to do with them. You don't have to, always be in their space or whatnot. But just give them that. They are parents. They gave birth to me. I'm glad. They could not take care of me, but that's okay. So I think that we must, balance it. In terms of adults need to, be more open to allowing young people have a voice. And at the same time, young people need to become more responsible and just let the Bible also lead them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Buki. Nsikan.
Okay, I think honor, I don't know if I don't know if honor can be earned. No. You just have to give it. So it's more like I can't say the command, but it feels like a command that you have to. So it calls on to you. So if you're in the presence of a king, do you have an option? So those are the things we need to ask ourselves again, so that when we are faced or seeing these people, I don't need to know him before I give him. I don't need to see the gray hairs to give him the honor. So I think somehow we need to re-educate ourselves so that at least in that space, we know we are working while doing the things we're doing. We're working in what we're supposed to do in terms of what the Bible instructs. Now, that's for the younger generation. For the older ones, unfortunately, or fortunately, we are the older ones in some cases. We intentionally have to make room because the tendency to enclose is there. Like I explained, I've seen that there are a lot of child-headed homes now. A lot of child-headed homes where the oldest person is a teenager. He provides for that family. In that sense, he's not just the man, he has a responsibility to cover. So when you are talking to someone like that, there are certain attributes that oozes out of him you might find offensive, but it's not his fault. Where he's coming from has thickened him to respond the way he's responding. So we need to make room to understand that, like we said, the things in this generation have exposed them to so much knowledge, given them, like in soup we call it a thickener, has thickened their content, and so the way they come out might not be the way we would want or perceive them. So I think naturally it's two ways. While the younger ones understand the space of honor, the older ones need to understand where the younger ones are coming from and make room, or say allow to or expand to include, just so that it becomes a wholesome presence.
Thank you, Nsikan. Ogo, do you have? Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for that. To the next question. There's a tendency to think of family in the traditional sense of father, mother, and children. What about single people, orphans, widows, widowers? Paul, for example, was never married. Does being alone negate the family experience? How does society ensure that these groups of people are not left behind in its policies? And what role can the church play in ensuring inclusivity?
Oh, okay. So, the traditional definition of the family is father, mother, and children. So, for the ones that don't fall neatly into this definition. I think the Bible is already clear on how we can deal with them. The Bible talks about how to relate with widows, how to attend to the poor amongst us, and how to deal with them. So from the Bible perspective and the church being inclusive, right? That was what you said. Being inclusive, the Bible provides clear guidelines on what it should be, because everyone is first of all a human being before any associations that they make in life, especially earthly associations. Someone can choose not to be married. We have situations of divorced parents raising children, single parents raising children, and all of that. So they come from somewhere, they belong to a family. And as much as we want to do what the Bible says and we want that definition to hold, the Bible is also clear on how to relate with these people, provide for the poor amongst you. If there's a young widow, support the elderly widows, support them. The church should encourage the families of the younger widows to support them. Where it's not possible, the church can step in. And as for the society, I think it's the basic human rights that every human being or every citizen of the society should have. The right to education, healthcare, the right to, and all of this should be upheld. We've had, I think it's in the US, or some of these countries where some women can't do stuff unless they are married. You can't get some documents signed. And we have things changing right now. And that's the way it ought to be. So people should be treated first as individuals, first as human individuals before they get treatment based on any associations that they might have.
Thank you, Ogo. Buki?
Just one thing. I think that the use of language is important. And I heard an instance. I was listening to a podcast with Lisa Harper earlier this week. And she's a single mom. Another single mom who was a divorcee was the one interviewing. And they were in church. And somebody came up stage and said, "Oh, all the women stand up, put your hand on your husband's shoulder and say, 'Thank you for helping me raise my child,' or something like that." It was a regular Sunday church service. And so she said, in our words, 30% of the population, of the parents' population, was left out, because 30% were either single, unmarried, and they had children. You know, so I think that I just want to speak to that we have to be deliberate in our language, and we must think through it. We can't just get excited on stage and just exclude a percentage of our population.
True.
Thank you.
Nsika?
I completely agree with that, because I think we need to understand that certain people could see some things and immediately a stigma is attached to it. A stigma can make a hungry person walk away from food. So even when the person needs the food, but because of that. So we need to be deliberate in our inclusiveness now, as a church. So we've seen where people of marriageable age walked away from a singles fellowship because it's called matured, ready to marry singles fellowship. You see, so I'm not naming any church, but you understand. So when I know that I'm a certain age and I've seen matured, ready to marry single fellowship, somehow I might not necessarily want to be a part of that. So I think, like she said, deliberately, we can find a way to level that playing field so that everybody would be at the same stage, so that it makes it easy to be more inclusive as a church.
Thank you so much, Nsikan. We have a question from the audience for you. It says, from the conversation so far, honor is like a command, so we just have to give it. So is it possible to honor someone and not honor them because they have not earned it?
Is it possible to give and not give? Okay. I think there is what you call dishonor. So acts could lead to dishonor. So a dishonorable member, an honorable member. Now, in explaining that, is it possible to honor and, in quote, dishonor someone at the same time? Yes, it is. I will explain it in the sense that in training, part of what I do is I train. So in the midst of the unique population we train, there's a certain clientele that we have to teach them assertiveness. as a woman, an elderly person approaches you and is touching you in a way you don't like, you're not going to shout or slap. Your no will be firm, but it could be with a smile. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. There are levels to which you can actually get your message across that this is not approved, this is not honorable, but you still do it with a jacket of honor. So I think that's where we should strive towards attaining. So yes, you can.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nsikan. Okay, we have 2 more questions from this list, but in case the audience have more questions, and we'll entertain those questions. Okay. Ogo, we'll start from you again. Traditional gender roles are changing due to the impact of education, technology, and access to finance. The changes in these roles are impacting families, especially from a marriage standpoint. These changes are putting pressure on the success or otherwise of marriages. There is therefore a need for re-education on and re-evaluation of these roles. On who does the onus fall for this re-education and re-evaluation? The church, the family, or the state?
Everybody. Because these roles and these expectations play out in every sector, in every place, in the church, in the home, in the office, in everywhere. So we have a meeting and they serve refreshments, and because I'm a girl or a lady, they expect that I should share food. And there might even be, even if we take it from maybe seniority, there might even be a more junior staff who is male. But just because I'm a lady, I might be expected to share the food and ensure. So I think it's important that this re-education happens at every place, starting from the family and the church, because we know the influence that the church holds in our community. So if the church is preaching that message, the elders, the people who come to church and listen to them are going to hear it, and then they go home and it is practiced then in the workplace and also the state, in the sense that there are some expectations you will not have in the secular place, and it's everywhere. I think everybody has a role to play.
Thank you, Ogo. Nsikan.
Okay, yes, everybody has a role to play. The gender roles are roles the society or culture ties on us, not sex roles, in the sense that the community or the people expect you to act in a certain way. The responsibility lies on everyone, in the sense that as a man in this church, why shouldn't I sweep? Why would you expect that? So if I'm sweeping and a lady comes, automatically I will expect her to take the broom from me and sweep. So I think those stereotypes need to start from us to change intentionally now. And then for our children, and then of course to the larger audience. Now, we did a bit of a survey as to why a lot of times you find men on the high rank in the sector of civil service and all of that, but the females, mid-level, those that attend to that level, normally would have somehow either had issues in marriage or failed at some point, and realized that from the census we did, 90% of them, when they're getting to the stage where they become, let's say, middle adults, disability, children, childbearing, somehow they have to choose between their work and taking care of their children. So naturally, they fizzle out. So as a community, as a society, put crutches in those institutions, and we start seeing a rise of women. Because they had their children close by, it didn't affect their work, and they started growing. So there can be intentional things done at certain places to enhance and encourage the women, or generally, it cuts across all boards. I don't know.
Thank you so much, Nsikan. Buki. No, okay, okay. To the next one. Genesis 1:28 enjoins us to be fruitful and multiply, subdue and replenish the earth. Is family planning at odds with God's mandate on being fruitful and replenishing the earth? Is there a role for family planning where the state restricts the number of children a family can have, as was done in China? Can that be against our faith? I will start with Buki.
I wouldn't know. Okay, I think that wisdom is profitable to direct. Yes, be fruitful and multiply, but be wise to know how much school fees cost, and you can't keep having kids you cannot take care of. So I struggle with the church and state issues in terms of a state restricting what I'm able to do as a citizen, for instance, like tell me I can't have more than one child, I would, I'll probably go on a protest for that. So, yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay, so Buki is saying that it lies with the individual, not the state. Nsikan?
I think it lies on both the individual and the state. Now, what makes us, I know we're online, but I'll just say it as it is. Naturally, if you're a Christian and a Muslim, you're in the same community, you're alone, and then the Christian, you have one wife, the Muslim has 4. Give it 9 years, that community is going to be a Muslim community. Because the 4 are going to marry more, and then so they're going to multiply. By the time they are 112, you're like 13. How do you level up? At that space, you realize that as a government, you probably have to either streamline, because if you're talking about population growth and how to balance things out, you might have to, as a state, say not more than 1 or not more than 2, depending on the case. If that is not being done, if we were talking about resources, for instance, I think I worked in Bielsa for a long time, and I can tell you point blank that I've gone to almost all the states. In fact, I've been to all, but the most expensive state is Bielsa, because they really don't have land to cultivate. They really don't have water good enough to get the fishes out. So the water you drink most times comes from outside. The food you buy in the market comes from outside. So they're going to put transportation costs, they're going to factor all those things in there. So eventually what you're going to have is a state fixed price, because at that point, whatever resources is there, they will have to struggle for it. Now imagine in a place where all they have is farm, and then in this small farm, you have over 4 million people on the farm. If you don't intentionally cut down on population explosion, you're going to have drought in a short time, because you can't farm. Sometimes you have to leave the farm fallow for a while, move to another place and all of that. So intentionally, in China, there was a time where castration, there was a time where they talked about the belt. The belt flooded Nigeria at some point, where if you use the belt for a period of time, it can render the man infertile. So if they didn't take that, because at some point it became impossible people were hiding to give birth. So the best thing to do was just circulate or make the belt normal, that people just buy and wear, and somehow they just couldn't have children again. As a family, people need, my mother has 8, her sister has 8, her brother has 8, so almost I have a lot of cousins. But the generation after, 3, 2. Is life better in that generation? It was even better than when they had 8. So why did we change to 3, 2? Now, right now, a lot of people have 2. Some people even have 1. And they seem to say, okay, I'm fine with that. It's a choice that we will have to decide. But like the Bible talked about, if you want to follow the scripture, I think it talks about having plenty. But I don't know if that is just the Bible talks about being fat and flourishing. So the exercise. But at the same time, if your quiver is full of them, your pocket should also have an equal value as well.
So your pocket should match your quiver.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you for that. We have 2 questions from the audience. We're running out of time, so I'd like you to, if you could just quickly touch on these 2 questions. Okay, so the first one is talking about building strong homes. There's an alarming increase in the rate of pedophilia and sexual abuse of children in our society today. What can we do to help prevent our children or younger ones around us from falling victim? The second question is, there are countries in the world with high rates of divorce and broken homes who are doing better economically than Nigeria. What are your thoughts on this? We'll start with Ogo.
You know what the Bible says, that righteousness exalts a nation and sin is a reproach. And by righteousness, it's right doings, right actions. So those countries are taking more right acts than we are doing with all the prayer and all the churches in Africa and in Nigeria. So we are not doing the right things. So those countries are doing the right things, even in spite. Of course, there will be challenges that the fact of broken homes and broken marriages is posing to the country. But looking at it strictly from the economic point of view, they are probably doing righteousness in those nations. And for the issue of sexual abuse, like I find this topic very sensitive because of the work that I do, and having to encountering all of these children who have been sexually abused. And one thing I would say to parents is you have to be watchful. You have to listen to your children, and you have to be sensitive to your children. If your child says, you have to learn that a child has a voice and can consent to something. We want to say, okay, go and stay with this person, hang out with this person, visit this person. And statistics has it that most of the abuses happen with people they know. So in that circle, you should know when your child is reluctant to spend time with somebody. And then we should teach our children from the age they can understand to speak up and you listen. Teach them the right names for their body parts. Tell them what is private, what is public. It's okay not to want to hug somebody, an aunt or anything. So we really have to be very watchful and very sensitive. And above all, pray. And let God help you. But for the parents, all we can do, we need to be watchful. We need to teach the children. We need to listen to them. We need to let them know that they have a voice and they can consent to something or not consent to it.
Thank you so much. Ogo, Buki.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add to what she said is to encourage open communication within the home. Unfortunately, a lot of people who are in my age group or even, older than me, you find families where one uncle would rape 3 daughters at different times, and 3 of them will never know because they did not talk, because they were afraid, they were ashamed, and all of those things. So I think that parents need to be very, very deliberate about encouraging open communication. I think, personally, I don't know, I just love conversations rather than pulling a child away. So yeah, don't sit on his lap. Why? You don't say, you are not supposed to sit on a man's lap. But you're not really educating that child. You're only commanding that child not to do something. So like she said, I think we have to be very intentional and deliberate about teaching young girls and even young boys about all of those things.
Thank you so much, Buki. Nsikan.
Okay, I think mine will go back a bit into what we had touched before, culture. It's quite my tough as well. And I will tell you that one of the failures we've done, or we've seen our parents do, is fear messaging. Fear messaging isn't the best approach. If a boy touches you, you get pregnant. And when the person touches and they don't get pregnant, they'll go for more. Just like when HIV, AIDS kills, they'll draw those calls and all of that. Fear messaging gives a false, because once there is a taste and it doesn't happen, there is a certainty that there's going to be more. Then for us as believers, we need to be sensitive. Like they rightly said, don't shut your kids up. Your child comes back. I've had a lot of case studies, so many. Teacher beat me. We're not careful enough to ask where. How? Because we've had cases where a teacher beat me, and you went to probe further and you realize that he told everybody, go and play outside. You, go into that room. How was the beating? Were you there? When you bath your children, do you inspect? Not the other side, the back side. There are a lot of things going wrong, but it's clothed because, well, this is not the platform for it, but we need to create intentional time to look for these younger ones because they are our responsibility, like we said at first. So as a family or as a people, when you're picking your child from school, what are your first conversations? How was your day? That time is tender. You can get the most out of it at that period. What happened in school? When you hear anything that is a bit off, probe further. You might just be shocked what you get to hear. So that's the way we can defend our point. The Bible said, having done all. A lot of us have not done anything at all. Talk less of having done all.
Can I
Okay, so just to add something, we've talked a lot about what we can do in the family, but the government, the nation needs to step in too. We have a lot of these cases, and from the community, there's a lot of stigma to it. So they don't want to talk about it. They'll tell you, leave it. Because we did this work mostly. Okay, so they tell you that's how God wanted it, or let God fight my battle. So we need to, the government needs to see it as crime against the state. And irrespective, yes, the family needs to consent or not, but irrespective of the position of the family, prosecute these people and conviction. So you have cases that have been reported, even the families that agreed to go to the court, the percent of prosecution is very low. And then the conviction is even like much lower. So when these perpetrators see this and there is no punishment, no consequences, it goes on and on. So the government also has a part to play in this.
Buki, just before you answer, I want to add a layer to the question. Okay, now we've seen the role. I've heard women complain about the role that the church has played in defending abusers. So a husband is assaulting a wife, there might be this desire for church to say, oh, forgive, and abuse continues. Now we're talking about child abuse. So what role should the church be playing? How should the church posture? What should it be? Should there be an openness? Let me just leave it there.
I think that the church is very influential. Church leaders are very influential. And so they must make out time, which is, something like this, like TBC conversations, where people are deliberately educated about these issues. I think there is that. And also, I think we've come to a point where you should not encourage anybody who is being abused to stay in that home. A church should shield. We have churches now who have centers, where they're like, if you call and say, my husband is beating me, they just come and help you pack your load and say, for now, madam, just come and stay in this house. Everything you need will be taken care of, just until we resolve. So I think there is that belief, and I don't know, I just thought of it just came to mind. You have to believe people until you prove the situation. Because there are situations where some, especially in the case of spousal abuse, some men are the best men in public. So you cannot imagine that they are the ones doing those things. So when somebody like that, when the wife, or sometimes, this was what I was going to add before we even came to this point. I was going to add, we're in a generation of sorrows, okay. If you see something, say something. Because I do not have children yet. But I cannot afford to look the other way. If I see somebody touching a child inappropriately, or if I see a child, some children are even so innocent that they don't even realize what is being done to them. So am I, as an older person around at that time, am I able to say, Tayo, come now? Am I able to lure that child away and find a way to either educate that child or report the situation to somebody that the child can listen to? So I was going to say that we all are also, it takes a village, they say. We must also all show responsibility, even if it's not happening within our own households. So back to my original point of, believe people when they talk about certain things until you try to prove the situation. So a pastor has been accused of rape. Believe them first, right? And then start to investigate, right? So, thank you.
Any other additions?
Okay, for the church, I think we've gotten to the point where we need to be deliberate just so that we don't fall victim to a lot of things. As a church, as a body, if something happens within the body, how do we respond? In the secular, there is how they respond. Why? Because they've laid down those rules already. As a church, if we have those rules laid down, you tell the man, sorry, it's not my fault. We have it here. So this is what's going to happen. So if this happens, the rule says if this happens within the vicinity of the church, we detain you and call the police. So it's not my fault. I'm sorry, Oga, I'm not angry with you. But see, we have bylaws. that as long as we caught you within this vicinity doing this, we have to hand you to the police. That is why you have procedures and manuals in the secular. As a church, most churches now have them. So that even if anybody accuses anyone around, or it shouldn't be heard amongst, but if it happens, as a church we are merciful. But the process, the acts, it's not my fault. It has to fall. Pastor Benro has a way of sounding that way as well. So I think it's not our fault. So I think it's just wrong.
Thank you, Sikan.
I think there's a culture of silence around these issues, and that's why it's in the communities, and the people in the communities are the people that come to church. Yeah. So we should start to demystify all of that and remove that culture of silence. And because if nothing is done, or there's so much stigma, so much discrimination, the next person is not going to speak up. And that culture of silence empowers the abusers. So we should be open, we should talk, and we should remove the stigma attached to it.
Thank you so much, Ogo. Thank you, Buki. Thank you, Nsikan. That brings us to the end of today's version of TBC's Conversations. Join us next week for more of this. Thank you.
Good morning, church. So I've been accused severally of not welcoming first-timers. So we'll start today by welcoming first-timers. So if you are worshiping with us for the first time on a Sunday morning, could you wave your hand? We recognize Pastor Dayo Agwola. He's a pastor now in a church in Ibadan. Please wave your hand. We have a gift for you. Okay. So straight to the announcements then. I just want to emphasize that a lot of the things that came out at the end around openness, it's something we try and live out deliberately in the Baptizing Church. And so if you are just joining us, please understand that there's room to be heard. And the pastors are known. I think I should just have them wave their hand so you can find the one that you look approachable and walk up to the person immediately after service. So Pastor Tokbe, could you wave your hand, please? Pastor Femi. That's Pastor Ife at the back. Okay. We also have a set of ministers, so you can feel free to reach out to any one of them. Very important, I want to stress again and again, I understand that there's been some back and forth.